Hi everyone, welcome to episode 116 of the ITSM Crowd, a really special extended episode today to talk about a topic that I think we'll just about scratch the surface of. We've got an amazing panel, we've got an industry case study, so I'm really looking forward to this one. And hopefully everybody who's with us, we'd love to hear your questions as well. Hopefully you've got some input too. But we're going to kick off with some brief introductions. So I'll go around my screen asking our panel to tell us a little bit about who they are and their background. So Christine, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Aykac. I'm a learning strategist and a leadership coach concentrated on the digital transformation, security, privacy, and technological advances, whatever comes our ways.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Noel?
Hi, I'm Noel Johansen. I'm a voiceover talent. I've been so for 27 years, and I also run with my business partner. I run one of the largest voiceover schools in North America.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Simone?
Oh, wow. I began my love affair with technology very early. It's been quite a journey, everything from manual typewriter, telex machines, Murray code, all the way through to satellites and more. My service career has been quite long, consultant, coach, trainer, Zoom along with everyone else. My background includes HR, organizational change, and also complementary health. But I find the most fascinating technology of all to be the human brain. So that's why I find myself in areas like machine humanity and ethical AI and emotional AI and all of that sort of thing. So looking forward to a fun discussion.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And Nicholas?
Hi, I'm Nicholas Shearer. I predate the web, bulletin boards and all the rest of it, but web and database design since a long time ago. Tech journalism for a while. I've been a trainer of technology for a good number of years as well, possibly going back to that, and projects and delivery and software with agility. More recently, I've been on the ethics committee at the University of Strathclyde for 10 years, so my big interest is ethics and data and how we can stop the technology running over people, possibly, and think about the ethical implications of the technology.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Amalia?
Hi. Good. So I'm not totally overlapping everyone. My first passion was IT, but I transferred my skills into privacy and risk. And that's where I've been for the last 15 plus years. I work with organizations to actually implement privacy programs. And I also teach at universities on the same topic, including cybersecurity and risk.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And I'm Claire Agutter. I'm the host for today's episode. For those of you that are watching us live, if you've got comments, questions, experiences that you want to share, please pop them into the YouTube chat. They'll come up here and we'll be able to see them. So hello, Daniel. Hello, Martin. Nice to see you with us already. Would love to hear from you during today's episode as well. The way we're going to structure today, because this is normally an ITSM Crowd is 30 minutes, but we've allocated an hour for this just because we want to make sure we cover it in sufficient depth. So the way we're going to run today is we'll start with some definitions like we always do. So I'm going to come to my panel shortly for those. And then Noel's here to share a case study and start to talk about how technology is impacting the industry that he works in. Noel and I have worked together for 17 years now, and it's frightening, but during that time the technology's changed so much, and some of the things that we've been discussing when we've been catching up have really made me think this is maybe something that we don't talk about enough. And then after that, into a more general discussion, talking about the impact of this on service management practitioners, what we need to think about from a design perspective, operations, user education, every single element, so covering some of that as well. So we'll kick off with the definitions piece, and even in the introductions there we had ethics, technoethics, privacy. So I guess, Nicholas, let's start with you if we can, and just ethics is a word we hear a lot but don't necessarily fully understand. So what does it mean?
Yeah, I won't go into too much detail about some of the definitions. Obviously, it's a topic you can really cover in huge amounts of detail going back to pre-biblical times. But ultimately, ethics is a set of moral principles that you adhere to. I suppose the biggest thing to think about is, are you doing the right thing or are you doing the right outcome? Probably the two main sides of ethical consideration. So there's lots of stuff in between that, obviously, on the society culture that you belong to, what is acceptable, and that goes for technology as well. What we consider acceptable in technology may well be vastly different across cultures, but also may change the way we used to think about things, because by default we accept technology as just something up there that we don't need to think about, and other people are making ethical decisions. But that's probably the bottom line: is are you doing the right thing, and what is the right thing, or from a consequences point of view, do you have the right outcome? And again, what do we mean by the right outcome? It's probably a good way to start. There's lots of stuff in between that as well, from specific cultures, or more narrowed to, say, virtue ethics, where it's really about ethics being an indicator of your character, which possibly you wouldn't use in the concept, especially of AI ethics, because we're anthropomorphizing artificial intelligence in that case. But yeah, it's a big conversation. If anyone else wants to add anything.
I think all of us just who pushed the unmute button first. You're right, Nicholas. It's there is a gray areas because of the ethics also ties to traditions, how we grow, all this stuff, and the differences between the environments on our lives. But one way to look at it, and then actually I will hand it over to Amalia on privacy, is for me is the fundamental right in a person. Okay, you can look any way that you want to look at it, but personal information is my information and it's my fundamental right. I see like that. That's why ethics also, I think we need to kind of define, also say within the security, within the privacy, whether artificial intelligence right now is the trend, but we know it will be something else tomorrow.
I should maybe add on the back of that, though, when we're talking specifically about machine learning and artificial intelligence, obviously there's no understanding in any of those systems. And when we talk about AI, we're not at a stage where there's any sort of real intelligence at this point. And even going forward, where something is beginning to be properly intelligent, any ethical decisions or what rightness of wrong or wrongness of things, we have to tell it what those are. We have to program those in. There's no explicit or implicit way for AI to figure out what is ethical. It's our conversation, not our machines.
Exactly, and this depends on who is coding. You see?
Well, this is why we've got that subset of ethics called technoethics. This is what a lot of people haven't really sort of, the technology that we've got, AI, is years ahead of a lot of the governance and things like that we have around the technology. So, for me, yes, there's ethics, and there's a very big philosophical conversation you can have around ethics. That's always been there. But for technoethics, this is about that, how we see technology and ethics socially embedded, I think, across enterprises and in the culture, and focusing on discovering what do we mean by the ethical use of technology? How do we protect against the misuse of the tech? And what are the common principles that we're going to be happy to live by that guides all the new advances that we have in when we develop it and apply it? How is that going to benefit our community, our society, and still enable the accessibility so that we have equity, you know, and that sort of thing across the board. So I've really enjoyed diving into techno ethics in particular because of the way technology actually shifts and changes the culture in our society as well.
Yeah.
So
And if I may jump, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So from so this is where we look at ethics, and which is what is not just acceptable to do, but the right thing to do. And we look at the way privacy laws have been shaped. And privacy laws, unfortunately, they're laws. They go by principles. And you look at GDPR, and it has 99 pages, or how many. It is very difficult to put into a law how we expect people to behave. We haven't embedded ethics as a principle in any laws because we wrongly thought that people know what's the right thing to do. But unfortunately, the right thing to do and making a profit are actually not congruent. They actually run in separate directions. One of the things you're going to see in some of the laws, for example, in Canada, when the Privacy Commissioner of Canada has interpreted sections of the law, they said what is reasonably expected by an individual, or what is expected by a reasonable individual. And that to me is ethics, because a reasonable individual is not going to ever expect for their information to be misused, or they're not going to expect ever that their emotional intelligence can be coded. We can't make technology take away our emotions in that moment and come up with the right answer at the other end.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. So I think it's obvious immediately what a huge topic this is, and what's going to be really helpful, I think, is to bring it in a little bit and talk about a real world example, because there's a lot of chat about, you know, is AI going to take my job? Is a robot going to do my job? And part of me thinks, brilliant, I would love a robot that did my job. That would be amazing.
I want one in the kitchen. I will buy the first one, or whoever, or whichever, to cook my meals. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But then Noel and I were chatting a while back, and Noel was sharing some examples from his industry with me, and it just made me think, actually, this is, maybe I've been a little bit flippant about this. So if I bring you in at this point, Noel, and talk a little bit about how technology is impacting your industry, your friends and your peers.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I might dovetail the ethical conversation just with the notion, because I studied ethics, that, you know, it's a marriage between public and private good, the good of the person. And the reasonable nature that you just mentioned, Amalia, is based on an Enlightenment idea that, you know, that are based on the principles of democracy. So individual rights versus societal rights. And I think that comes into this real world situation that we're now facing, because that's exactly what's happening in terms of people's privacy and data being vocal data too. I mean, slightly historically, just to give you an example, it sort of blew up on the 24th of April when the Washington Post published an article on voiceover and AI, and gave examples like Remy Michel's voice being scraped by a site called Revoicer. Bev Standing's case with TikTok, she's actually a friend of mine, so I know a little bit about that, where TikTok actually bought her voice from another company and used it to create commercials on TikTok and did not remunerate her. And as a result, it was a huge federal district court case in the United States in which she sued TikTok and won. Whether that will continue in that way, we don't know. But certainly the situation with AI is, yeah, it's getting worse. I mean, even personally, I do a lot of corporate narration, and I haven't seen a corporate narration job. I do 3 a year at least, big ones. Haven't seen one in the last 8 months. And I've checked in with my clients, and nothing's on the pipeline. So I mean, even from a personal standpoint, I can tell you that initially AI is affecting the corporate narration and e-learning section of voiceover very heavily. Now, whether that's affecting larger voiceovers, like in voiceover, there's levels of the industry. So there's commercials and animation, which are directable, right? And in that realm, I can tell you that even Disney producers, are still saying, listen, until AI is directable, we're still going to use human beings. So in that way, there was an initial panic about voiceover being taken over by AI, but I think we've settled in the industry and realized that that's a more nuanced conversation. So, I just...
If I may interrupt you just a second.
Yeah,
That was a
go ahead.
great case that you provided. I'm thinking of how our banks and telecoms expect us to authenticate ourselves through our voice. And what's going to happen? Well, first of all, there was a case in Canada, and I raised it too to the privacy commissioner, where I just learned when I provided my answers that actually my voice was being recorded and I wasn't even asked for permission. Number two, the Quebec province in Canada has actually put that in the legislation that they have to provide permission for any biometrics use. But think about your voice, my voice, being used to authenticate myself to the bank, and it's not me.
Of course. So that's completely possible.
Oh, 100%.
That's existed for a while. So yeah, it's extremely dangerous. I mean, yeah, I mean, I just think just to put in context what's happening is, yeah, that technology is so advanced. All of you have sort of touched on that, yeah, there's not only financial loss, it is a risk to our own privacy data, biodata, as well as vocal data.
Impersonation, yeah.
I'm actually really interested in what happened with the voiceover thing, Noel, too, just even from a legal standpoint, because we know that there's always been copyright, if you like, around even our famous people, the use of their image, the use of their voice, and things like so those laws, I guess, or the legalities around that always existed in some way. So I would have thought that something like what happened with TikTok, etc., that surely that would have come under, and she should have been paid for that, because it's still a copyright of her voice and impression that she has condoned this advert or whatever the case might be. So surely, so there's the legal side I thought already existed. The security side, one of the things that we've always been taught and why it was so great for security, thumbprints and everything else, that it always does have a unique, each person's voice is unique, and that's why it was so good to use it for security in the past. But now with the being able to imitate that, now we've got another cyber threat that has to be dealt with. But then on the health side of things, which I delve into a little bit, is that AI is being able to take, so for example, there was a famous footballer, he had lost his voice, he'd had problems with cancer and all of this, and he couldn't speak anymore. But because they had done lots of advertising and podcasts and things like that, AI was able to take all of his voice print work and everything. They've put it into his machine, where now when he types his messages to his parents and his siblings and his kids, they can hear his voice again now. So you've got 3 completely different focuses just around the voice and what AI can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that
for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
We shouldn't vilify AI. I mean, no, I mean, and that's not to vilify AI, but it's just that we're on the precipice of, losing our rights around our privacy and data, and that's what we have to protect aggressively right now. Before we address the benefits of AI, I mean, like any technology that's ever come through our evolution, we have to understand it, and this one, because it's affecting our very expression as human beings, it's a big one, and I think we need to be careful immediately before we start applying it in all these areas without legislation.
And one of the things that we discussed, Noel, was and this isn't a technology issue so much as a business issue, but it's still an ethical issue, which was your colleague who'd been uploading samples to a website, and hidden in the terms and conditions was something to say, thanks for uploading your samples, these are ours now, which I guess is where the education piece comes in, Christine and Amalia, in that you need to empower people. Ideally, these things wouldn't happen in the first place, but you need to empower people so that they are educated, and I'm as guilty as anybody of just ticking the box and going, yeah, fine, read that.
Yes, Amalia.
Well, I mean, we live now at the speed of light. So if I want something, I want something. I need it now. I don't have time to research an alternative. Maybe there isn't an alternative. I personally don't use WhatsApp, and I know everyone here is going to faint. So if there's going to be, empty chairs, I will keep talking. But I don't use WhatsApp, first of all, because if I did, I wouldn't call myself a privacy professional. But people, even in the privacy profession, are telling me, oh, but this is just for us when we meet at the conference. But for me, as a matter of principle, I am not going to use WhatsApp when WhatsApp has been put in the press. How many times the regulators have gone after them for huge violations against people's personal information? Why would I side with that? So I'm going to use Signal. So but the problem is, again, education, Claire, people don't know. They don't know the alternative. They don't know how to assess it. We're moving at the speed of light. We need to make decision now. No, sorry, yesterday now. Like, obviously, people are not going to make the right decision. They're going to make the easy decision.
Yeah. And Nick, I'll just bring Nicholas in as well. I mean, should this be something that we have to educate ourselves on as users, or should we trust that the technology that we interact with, the organizations that we interact with, are going to behave ethically? Amalia was mentioning earlier this divergence between profit and good. Is that always the case?
Yeah, I mean, we've not mentioned it so far, but there's obviously a bit of bias already, that when we're talking about ethical behavior, it tends to be biased towards the companies that are creating things, whether that's Facebook, Google, or anyone else, and they use that data for whatever they see fit, more or less, and are often fined for doing that. So if we were to address this at all, then the focus needs to be more on a bias towards people rather than big companies, and we're not there yet. And I think in most cases, most people are quite accepting that the likes of Facebook has all this data, that then they can affect their bottom line and their profit based off the back of your data. Eventually we can get there. The only ethical frameworks that we have really are, step back. When you talk about GDPR, so we mentioned that GDPR is a legal minimum rather than ethical framework. It could be part of an ethical framework if we had such a thing. And all these big companies often say that they do have ethical conversations. They might have an ethical body that's internal, but it's inherent with their own biases towards their profit ultimately. So you could maybe say there's an argument for GDPR and the rights that enshrines being expanded into an ethical framework that is properly ethically considering people over the companies that profit from the people.
Yeah. So GDPR, as you all know, has made some attempts to anchor itself into an ethical framework, and just the fact that they have mandated an external DPO, or, with interpretations of what that is, but as someone that is actually siding with the law. They're saying, no, you can't do that because the law says this. I know you want to interpret it this way, but it's too far from the letter of the law. Other countries, we don't have that. We don't have an independent person to watch, like a watchdog, for what's ethical, what's correct, what the law intended.
But on the other hand, we cannot just expect the law or the government or the organizations to protect us. That's why I was jumping actually what Amalia said earlier. People doesn't know what they don't know.
I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of good frameworks that are being developed. And I think the interesting thing is that, we've got, European Commission's, framework for trustworthy AI. You've got the PI model through the Ethics Lab. There's OECD, UN, IEEE. I can just keep going with the names. There's a lot of them, even in Australia, where they had the AI ethics framework, but they now have a separate independent organization called the Responsible Metaverse Alliance. So these bodies, these ethical bodies, are jumping up everywhere. Some are around a little bit longer. When I look into each of them and I see that there's a lot of the same, of the things they want, a lot of the same principles and things. But what I'm finding is that there's still the cultural base, there's still the different legalities according to the governance of the country that we're in and all of that. So I still think it's one of those interesting minefields. In terms of our responsibilities, we cannot outsource our responsibilities to machines. It's a bit like Frankenstein's monster. He built this thing and then let it run out into the world. But it needs education, it needs nurturing, it needs the input from the parent, if you like, or the parents or the society of what we feel is best for globally or communities or whatever it might be. So I think, there's a little bit of the Frankenstein monster thing going on here. But how do we then have all of these different ethical frameworks from the different countries? Are we going to have a global one, or is it constantly just going to be these separate bodies and hope that they talk to each other?
And I just want to remind everybody who's watching us live, we would love to hear from you as well. So if you've got questions for the panel, if you've got experiences you want to share, pop them into the chat and we'll bring them up on screen and address them. But I think that's a good point, Simone, that you just raised. And maybe to come back to you, Noel, because you're with your community are trying a sort of a range of different approaches to address this. So tell us about some of the action that you've been taking.
Yeah, so obviously I'm in the union here and the United States, but the union in Canada has a collective agreement whereby your services are protected on the contract that you sign. But with the advent of AI, a lot of producers are putting in sneaking in stuff about in perpetuity and sneaking in stuff about machine learning. And so I'm on an AI panel for the union out here. And we had a meeting on Monday. So yeah, we're pushing for language in that either we can add to the collective agreement or put in contracts for agents to put in with individual contracts with producers so that you can write your own AI ticket in a way. And then eventually hope, other people are working on changing Canadian law. I don't know. But the way it works is if you put something in a contract in Canada and both parties agree to it, it is in effect enforceable. So we're pushing hard on trying to protect our likeness and our privacy data in the contracts, in the union contracts, but also in the contracts that agents individually make with producers. Now, what if you're not in the union? That's when I think Amalia and what you're talking about, Christine, where you have to, and Simone, that you have to watch out for yourself. You have to be vigilant about your own protection, and you have to look out for that language. So there's a rider that Canada copied off the NAVA agreement in the States that emanated out of Toronto in Canada. So agents are using that to protect their voiceover clients, particularly from AI use. Machine learning is the real thing, right? That's the key language that you want to avoid signing to. And then there's the issue of international contracts. Like I was just asked to sign a contract in India for a narration job I did. And not only was the contract bananas in terms of violating my privacy, but I looked at Indian law and they interpret damages differently. So you can't actually, it's not even the same kind of interpretation. So when we talk about interpretation of ethics and law, it's not even the same interpretation in different countries. So and to enforce a contract for me in an Indian court is laughable. Mm-hmm. So it's the kind of things that particularly people in my industry have to watch out for. And so you do it on an individual level through your agent, and then eventually you hope that the legislation of the unions affects the national laws.
There's actually a separate worry as well. It's very specific to be talking about the contracts and your rights and being able to enforce those. But just to mention ChatGPT at the moment, I'll get back to why this is relevant. But a lot of the data is from Common Crawl, which is a data set that dates back to 2011, I think. And it's been built up over time with a lot of the information that's published on the web. We all know how factually accurate that is, but it's a collection of information on the internet. And certainly from a voice point of view, Stephen Fry was in the news recently because someone just using the data set of his Harry Potter book narrations had him narrate something else. And he was completely unaware of this. So where there is that acceptance, or where it's possible for a producer to get that large data set and argue that it's public, it's out there, therefore I can use it, and then use it, then it's not really a specific contract argument anymore. It's a separate higher level, this is public data, I'm going to use it, which is much more worrying. That's something that's accepted.
I mean, that's why the strike, one of the elements in the strike in the United States is over that, is AI usage of that and pirating people's likeness. Yeah.
Interesting. There's a recent survey come out from LSE, the London School of Economics and Political Science, and it was about a global survey they did on AI in journalism and news agents and things like that. And what's interesting is that of the, let me check my numbers, over 100 news organizations over 46 countries that was studied. It's a fairly good gambit that they've looked at. But more than 60% of them are really concerned about the ethical implications on journalistic values, or the accuracy in using these things, or the fairness and transparency that, did a human write this, or was, the AI just wrote it from cobbling together from all the data that it can find across the world, and how it's that it can be used for doing a lot of the high heavy lifting, I guess, in some cases of the research, but not having human agency to be able to verify the data, or the way it's fact check, I guess, in some ways, as journalists are meant to do. But what does that mean to them? So the industry is being pushed. Some of them are excited about what's happening with technologies and ChatGPT. Some love it because it helps them kick off their creativity in story writing and so on. I actually like that. Use it a little bit of a tiny little muse, to kickstart some of my thoughts. But then after that, where's the transparency on who it is and stuff like that?
So if you push that, and you're right. I mean, so if you push that further, and there are some great uses out there. I'd love to have a tool that would help me do the research, like find a lot of, I unearth things. I have to go on various university websites and find obscure things that I am just delighted when I find them, but it takes me hours and hours. But one of the things, and I've been on this talk before, this whole craze about AI, on academic trustworthiness. So did Socrates say that, or did ChatGPT invent it, coupled it together, and just signed it Socrates? You know, like we're now starting to really go back to the beginning of humanity. Are we going to trust those sources? If I'm at the university and a professor pulled like that, I don't know, was a lawyer that did that and said he wrote his whole, paper or whatever he was presenting in the court with ChatGPT. Am I going to now trust the professor? Am I going to respect the professor? So where is the academic truth in the end? Like, is it really what I'm being told? And you can see how this goes into a very big black hole, because instead of inspiring people to be learners for life, they're going to say, but I can't trust anything. Why am I going to go learn that? I don't want to, So, but so to your point, Simone, I think is when we attribute some good thought to ChatGPT, I think we're committing a crime. But when we are doing research and put it through the human filter, there's nothing wrong with that. If I get a tool to organize my 15 workers and put tasks for them, fabulous. There might be some inaccuracies there that, maybe I need to, use a certain tool versus another tool. But, it pretty much takes away that administrative task from me. Great. But when I ask this tool to put some strategic thought or some, stop the presses.
Yeah. This is when we were working with Amalia, because losing your own voice. Can you imagine? I mean, this lawyer or those people needs to be careful that when they let the AI or the whatever the tool they are using write for them, actually it's going to write whatever is common.
Yeah.
These are mechanical, technical tools. It looks at the statistical information. 80% population defines the ethics this way. It will define that way.
Yeah.
But it may not be your idea.
Yeah. Take a step forward, and now everything we do is built by software. So I'm going to tell a tool to create code for me. That scares me like to no end, because we're talking about cybersecurity, ransomware attacks, and all kinds of like hackers. And if I'm gonna ask someone to write code from ether, I would just cobble these two together. How can I trust that with my life?
And also free tool. You use the free tool.
Yeah. I could be a programmer tomorrow. Okay, let me go on LinkedIn and say I'm a programmer too. Okay, I'm a cook and a programmer at the same time, because I use some ChatGPT tool. And that's absurd.
How might it change, actually, from an education perspective, kids coming through, if there's, we know that there's been certain writings banned and things like that from ethical and moral circumstances, because today some people think, oh my gosh, you can't say that anymore. And so retrospectively, some of our, history is being rewritten. Is AI also going to be used in this fashion, where when we know what the actual fact was back in history, but in 20, 30 years time, is AI going to be saying something different because we've deleted information?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly it. Are we rewriting humanity? What's truth in the end?
Truth or fact?
So I think one of the challenges with this kind of conversation is how we've typically treated technology in the past. So if your AI has a bias, you blame the coder who wrote the code. And one of the things that I'd like us to consider maybe is, how do we start to be good? So I guess maybe I'll come to you first, Nicholas. Where in the organization should these decisions be made? Where do we start? How do we start to be good? Because it's not, the technology is the end point. So how do we start to bake this into our organizations?
As far as ethics is concerned, the framework needs to be in place and considered where you're generating any data at all. Specific to machine learning, where you've got data sets that you're using to learn from, and end up with a model that you're going to use, if you've not considered the ethics of how that data set is created, then you've got all sorts of bias in it. It could be anything. It could be audio, video, just general data, general information. There will be a bias based on where you've got it from. So for me, it's a data governance issue. It's how can you describe your data quality and your rules around data factuality. Building a data set on those principles means you've got a better starting point. Then your data set that you're building a model from is provably accurate. You can say this is where it came from. So when we're talking about ChatGPT, provably it's not very accurate. We know it's just the internet. Going forward, we're already seeing where other companies are trying to profit from this. So Reddit and Stack Overflow, I think, are already talking about, because in their terms and conditions, they own the data, they would present that as a data set. And again, how accurate is that? I mean, Reddit could be anything and everything is in Reddit. So without that starting point, if you're just considering the ethics from the point that you've got a data set or a data model, it's already too late then.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring up a question here. So we've got a question from Martin. Let me see if we can just get this up on screen. I don't know if we're trying to fit too much on screen. Here we go. So apologies to the people on the bottom row. We'll bring your faces back soon. So it seems like Canada's leading the way here. So hello, Martin. Nice to have you with us. So Martin's saying he's got a friend who is a lawyer in Canada and deals with the movie industry. He's obsessed with AI and the bills that are appearing all over the world, in particular Europe. Is new legislation coming? So I think we've touched on this a little bit, but what do we think, panel? Is new legislation coming, and will it be industry specific? Will it be country specific? What does the future look like?
I think it would be terrible if it was industry specific, but that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't know if it's going to, it might be industry specific, but the good news is when data privacy laws were introduced in Europe regarding collection of people's data on websites, Europe passed that law, and the rest of the world went, so what? Good luck. And then Europe said, I'll tell you what, any European citizen's data that's collected on any website illegally is liable for punitive damages in a European court. And overnight, the world went, oh, shoot.
It's not.
And they changed their website law, including our school. Because I remember our coordinator calling me and saying, we need to change our cookies and data privacy because Europe just made blah, blah, blah. And overnight it happened. So I was going to say this at the end of the podcast, but or the discussion, but I'm optimistic in the sense that I think because Europe's legislation is ahead of the game, they have way more ways for punitive as well as prescriptive law. I feel in this area, North America is sadly lagging behind, and they have immense corporate pressure from these conglomerates. Europe tends to be more sensible about this. And I think by a trickle-down effect, I'm hoping that laws that Europe passes regarding privacy, data privacy when it comes to likeness and all that Martin is referring to, even in industry, but not just in the movie industry and across the board, is going to force Canadian law, North American law, Asian law, similarly. That's my hope.
Yeah, and you're right. It's called the Brussels effect, right? And it's
the Brussels effect.
Yeah. I don't know how others feel, but as a foreigner living in Europe, and I've done so for nearly 10 years living in France now, but it was very weird coming when that all came in, and when you said, right, that's it, and they pretty much put up a digital wall, if you know what I mean. And what happened is there were all these websites that I was, member in, and some social, some were my research and things like that. And all of a sudden, when I went in to go and get it, I actually couldn't access it, and it really annoyed me. So I think also where it's great, they've put the protections in, and I think what they've done is starting to find, well, where is the balance of that? Because I still need to work. There's still clients that are actually global, and we still need to access certain things. So how do we balance that for the everyday person that needs it to work and that sort of thing? So I think it's great, and it was very noticeable when it happened. It'll be interesting to see how it happens on the other side of that digital wall, if you know what I mean. Because it was like, I can't find this anymore.
Yeah, but I think Europe is taking a great approach to create their own digital markets rules. And if you are not there first, then those are going to be the rules you're going to have to abide by.
Yep.
And that's it. And this has been, I think this is we're on a podcast, so I have to be careful, but this is where the United States is actually going to suffer because they were not there first to impose their rules. And I'm just going to let that sit because
they weren't there first.
They
weren't there first on the privacy website issue either.
Well, you know, there's 9 or 11 privacy commissioners that have signed a letter saying data scraping is illegal, and now we're going to investigate. And Canada's one of the signatories, in Australia and the UK, but that's what's going to happen. And now we see a bill coming up about data brokers in the United States going, no, you can't do this anymore. And by 2026, it's going to be illegal. Because why? Because the United States is going to be left behind. And everyone else is going to be doing the right thing. And through contracts, as you said, they're going to be told, you can't do that. So one way or another, they're going to be caught in the net. And it's better if you're there first than if you have to backpedal.
Yeah, that's why my hope is that being instead of reactive, right now is everything reactive, be proactive. Because ChatGPT just make it more common. We had AI, we had they scrapped the data before ChatGPT, without asking. And, like all the big consulting companies, they foresee what is upcoming. And so I think we have to look at it and try to be proactive. Otherwise, you just watch the plane arriving to London or European city from North America. You will see the phones are just beeping, saying, now we need the approval. We need another approval,
And I'm also interested too in how that accessibility translates to the equity side of things, the inclusivity and accessibility as a practical question. I think that's really key as well. Who's missing out on being able to have access to this information or use technology in and of itself.
I'll just bring you in, Nicholas, because I think you were going to say something, and then we'll have to come to our final thoughts.
Okay. What was I going to say? So just we hinted at GDPR there, and to Simone's point, I think it was very a lot of panic from a lot of businesses that, back to my point earlier, that hadn't really considered data governance and data quality. So it made it very difficult for them to think about protecting people's data because they didn't particularly care before. Meaning there's lots of complaints online about how overwhelming GDPR is, or CCPA in California, which, by the way, I'm hopeful is going to be have the same effect on North America, United States of America, that the GDPR has in Europe, in that because it has that penalty of, if you're selling to anyone here, then regardless of where you are, there's punitive damages if you don't protect their data. But we'll see what happens there. But yeah, that general inability to structure their creation of data, their managing of data, and their data quality meant that any sort of data protection rules are far too difficult for a lot of companies. So for anyone that complains about GDPR, I have no sympathy, because it's forcing you to think about data protection going forward.
I may have complained about GDPR in the past. I shall endeavour not to in the future. we're coming to the end of our time. That's been immensely educational. What I'm going to do now is just go around our panel and ask them for any final thoughts, any resources that they want to share, and also, you know, where can people find you if they want to kind of get in touch afterwards. Obviously not WhatsApp, Amalia, but I'll come to you first, Amalia. Any tips, resources, and where can people find you?
Just as a parting final thought that just entered my brain right now is bring ethics into your risk management framework. I think that you cannot continue to have, if you have even a modicum of risk management, anything, you cannot ignore ethics into it. And I do agree with Nicholas. In fact, a lot of data protection authorities and lawyer firms that are very recognized, they tell you if you want to implement this law properly, think about data governance and privacy, not just privacy. You have to have data governance, you have to have rules. And as far as where you can find me, I'm on LinkedIn at this name and not on WhatsApp.
Fabulous, thank you. And Nicholas, final thoughts, tips, resources, where can people find you?
Well, the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, just as Nicholas Shearer. A final thought, I mean, I'm optimistic about the future slightly. I think that it was Gartner that said by 2025, something like 10% of produced data on the internet is probably going to be AI created. That doesn't necessarily worry me if you think about the amount of data that's produced year on year. It's going to happen anyway. We just need to get a handle on the ethical implications of that. And a lot of that is going to be general public awareness and the awareness from companies that are using people's data, that they're not going to get away with a blasé, profit biased use of it. So, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. And Simone?
Number of resources that I use a lot. I do go to World Economic Forum. I look at the Government AI Readiness Framework, which is a really good one to look at, to do some assessments for yourselves. On my website as well, just using my name as it is, Simone Jo Moore. There's a couple of great Techo-Doco series on the era of humanizing IT and Youth Rising Power, and Claire, you were a part of that, which has still got some very relevant and great information in there. Look at the different artificial intelligence frameworks out there for ethical AI. So as we've mentioned, Canada has them, Australia has them, the States has them, European Commission. So do use those tools and have a good read through them. You know, we're in a fascinating time where we can, you know, we are rediscovering our humanity, I think, through this process. And I love what Albert Einstein once wrote when he said, it's become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. Concern for man himself and his fate must always form the chief interest of all technical endeavors. Never forget this in the midst of all your diagrams and equations. So stay human.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm going to be going verify that after the episode. Noel, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll talk from the specific to the general. I think for people in the voiceover industry, just be mindful of the language used in contracts that you sign. If you have an agent, make sure they're using the writer based on NAVA and AVA, and look out for like terms like machine learning and in perpetuity. And I, you know, in terms of resources, we've been talking about GDPR, and I think you should just look at the website because it's pretty informative, and learn about GDPR. And once you know the principles behind that, we've talked about ethics and principles, and then you can start to form your own framework, because I think the best protection we have is our individual vigilance in any walk of life. And then the final thing I have is more of a question, actually. We've been talking about regulation and punitive and prescriptive law, but I think my question is, just like how do you incentivize oil companies to be pro-climate? How do you by Shell having electric charging stations, how do you incentivize, and this maybe for next time, how do you incentivize a corporate framework in the corporate world to respect data privacy, because it's human beings behind all this, right? How do you get those folks to respect and incentivize them to protect the principles that we stand up for with respect to data privacy in general? Like, not just by slapping a law on them, which is, one way to go, but how do you incentivize it from a corporate technological viewpoint? That's more of a question than it is an answer.
It is an awesome question, and I think it is one for another episode. Thank you so much, Noel. Christine, any final thoughts? Where can people find you?
Yes, because this is very right question, Noel. But like my brain is flying right now. No, I will not answer this. But one more thing I will add is not just the voiceover. You see, I create training materials and distribute it online and with Amalia as well. That's why recommendation, whatever you are producing, whoever is presenting this, read the agreement carefully. There's lots of organization, lots of people reaching out to me to use my material, but only that's why we have one company, Udemy. It's very strict, very clear. Everything identified. I know my, training is safe over there, and the other organization in UK, they had very detailed, privacy, data governance, data ethics rules that read. It was really good because it's very similar. You see, we are producing something, and you are putting online because people needs to learn. It's important. I like doing this, but on the other hand, of course, I don't want to be taken out of the context and use it differently, which will upset me more. But that's why learning is important. As well, everyone said, go to the website, analyze. You can reach out to me and LinkedIn as well. I'm active, and we have our website with Amalia that you can see the lots of information over there as well. But learning is the key. Try to be proactive.
Fabulous. Thank you so much to all of the panel. Thank you, Christine, Noel, Simone, Nicholas, Amalia. Thank you to everybody who's been with us as well. Martin, thank you for your question. That's been such a fabulous episode. I've got a lot to think about, and I might have to go read some more GDPR things. But thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you to the panel. Really appreciate your time, and hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.